Chapter 3. My stomach roiled around with disgust at the macabre sights inside the building and with tension at what had nearly happened. One of my ears was still ringing from the sound of the gunshot. I was starting to shake all over now, the adrenaline rush fading and leaving me jumpy and wired. I stuck my hands in my duster pockets, careful of the blood-stained shard of glass wrapped in my handkerchief, and turned my face into the wind, closing my eyes. Relax, Harry, I told myself. Calm down. Breathe in and out, and just keep doing that. See? You aren't dead. Dead people don't breathe like that. You aren't Spike all torn to pieces on the floor. You don't have any bullet holes in you either. You're alive, and Murphy's all right, and you don't have to look at that eyeless face anymore. But I could see the torn body still, behind my eyelids. I could smell the ghastly stench of his opened innards. I could remember the blood, sticky on the dusty floor, congealing thick with tiny flecks of drywall. I tasted bile in my throat and fought to keep from throwing up. I wanted to scream, to run, to wave my arms and kick something until I felt better. I could understand Agent Ben's reaction almost, if she had been working a string of killings like the one I'd just seen. You can't stare at that much blood for very long without starting to see more of it everywhere else. I just kept taking deep breaths in and out. The wind was cool and fresh in my face, sharp with smells of the coming autumn. October evenings in Chicago are chilly, breezy, but I love them anyway. It's my favorite time of year to be outside. I eventually calmed down. Murphy must have been doing the same thing beside me, making herself relax. We both started walking back towards the car at the same time, no words needing to be passed between us. Murphy began and fell silent again. I didn't look at her, didn't speak. I'm sorry, Harry. I lost control. Agent Denton is an asshole, but he does his job, and he was right. Technically speaking, I didn't have any right to be on the scene. I didn't mean to drag you into all this. She unlocked the doors and got in the car. I got in the passenger side, then reached out and plucked the keys from her hand as she began to start the engine. She quirked her head at me, narrowing her eyes. I closed my hands around the keys. Just sit down and relax for a while, Murph. We need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea, Harry, she said. This is the thanks I get for saving your life. Twice now. You're going to hold out on me? You should know how it works, she said, scowling, but she settled back in her seat and looked out the windshield of the car. We could see the police, forensics, and the FBI suits moving back and forth inside the building. We were both quiet for a long time. The funny thing was that the problems between Murphy and me came from the same source as the problems with Kim Delaney earlier tonight. Murphy had needed to know something to pursue an investigation. I could have given her the information, but it would have put her in danger to do so. I'd refused to say anything, and when I'd pursued the trail by myself all the way to its end, there had been some burning buildings and a corpse or two. There wasn't enough evidence to bring any charges against me, and the killer we'd been after had been dealt with. But Murphy hadn't ever really forgiven me for cutting her out of the loop. In the intervening months, she'd called me in for work several times, and I'd given the best service I could. But it had been cool between us. Professional. Maybe it was time to bridge that gap again. Look, Murph, I said. We never really talked about what happened last spring. We didn't talk about it while it was happening, she said, her tone crisp as autumn leaves. Why should we start now? That was last spring. It's October. Give me a break, Murphy. I wanted to tell you more, but I couldn't. Let me guess, Cat had your tongue? She said sweetly. You know I wasn't one of the bad guys. You have to know that by now. Hell's bells, I risked my neck to save you. Murphy shook her head, staring straight forward. That's not the point. No? Then what is? The point, Dresden, is that you lied to me. You refused to give me information that I needed to do my job. When I bring you in on one of my investigations, I am trusting you. I don't just go around trusting people. Never have. She took a grip of the steering wheel, her knuckles whitening. Less than ever now. I winced. That stung. What's worse, she was in the right. Some of what I knew. It was dangerous, Murph. It could have gotten you killed. Her blue eyes fixed on me with a glare that made me lean back against the car door. I am not your daughter, Justin, she said in a very soft, calm voice. I am not some porcelain doll on a shelf. I am a police officer. I catch the bad guys and I put their asses away, and if it comes down to it, I take a bullet so that some poor housewife or CPA doesn't have to. She got her gun out of its shoulder holster, checked the ammo and the safety, and replaced it. I don't need your protection. Murphy, wait, I said hastily. I didn't do it to piss you off. I'm your friend. Always have been. She looked away from me as an officer with a flashlight walked past the car, shining the light about on the ground as he looked for exterior evidence. You were my friend, Dresden. Now? Murphy shook her head once and set her jaw. Now I don't know. There wasn't much I could say to that, but I couldn't just leave things there. In spite of all the time that had gone by, I hadn't tried to look at things from her point of view. Murphy wasn't a wizard. She had almost no knowledge of the world of the supernatural, the world that the great religion of science had been failing to banish since the Renaissance. She had nothing to use against some of the things she had encountered, no weapons but the knowledge that I was able to give her, and last spring I had taken that weapon away from her, left her defenseless and unprepared. It must have been hell for Murphy to daily place herself at odds with things that didn't make any sense, things that made forensic teams just shake their heads. That's what special investigations did. They were the team specially appointed by the mayor of Chicago to investigate all the unusual crimes that happened in the city. Public opinion, the church, and the official policy still frowned at any references to magic, the supernatural, vampires, or wizards, but the creatures of the spirit world still lurked about. Trolls under bridges, cradle-robbing fairies, ghosts and spooks and boogers of every kind. They still terrorized and hurt people, and some of the statistics I put together indicated that things were only getting worse, not better. Someone had to try to stop it. In Chicago, or any of its sprawling suburbs, that person was Karen Murphy and her SI team. She had held the position longer than any of her many predecessors because she had been open to the idea that there might be more than was dreamt of in Horatio's books, because she used the services of the country's only wizard for hire. I didn't know what to say, so my mouth just started acting on its own. Karen, I'm sorry. Silence lay between us for a long, long time. She gave a little shiver finally and shook her head. All right, she said, but if I bring you in on this, Harry, I want your word. No secrets this time. Not to protect me, not for anything. She stared out the window, her features softened in the light of the moon and distant streetlights more gentle. Murphy, I said, I can't promise that. How can you ask me to? Her face flashed with anger and she reached for my hand. She did something to one of my fingers that made a quick pain shoot up my arm, and I jerked my hand back by reflex, dropping the keys. She caught them and jammed one of them into the ignition. I winced, shaking my stinging fingers for a moment, then I covered her hand with mine. Okay, I said. All right. I promise. No secrets. She glanced at me and my eyes for a breath, and then looked away. She started the car and drove from the parking lot. All right, she said. I'll tell you. I'll tell you because I need every bit of help I can get. Because if we don't nail this thing, this werewolf, we're going to have another truckload of corpses on our hands this month. And, she sighed, because if we don't, I'm going to be out of a job and you'll probably end up in jail.